So, welcome to those who are viewing a recording of this. We are so delighted to have yet another fabulous guest on our monthly A Plan webinar series. Today is not only a well-known expert in the psychedelic medicine space, biohacker, author, and entrepreneur, but also one of my best friends for over 24 years, Kaia Roman. So Kaia, we're just delighted to have you here today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you to everyone who made it out to talk about this very innovative topic. I really want to commend you and A Plan for discussing this. This is super cutting edge. And just congratulations to all of you for showing up and being here and taking this time to learn and taking this time for yourselves. I'm really honored to share this space with you. And I thought, and Sarah recommended that we could start with just like a centering meditation to bring ourselves in and just get really present for this very important topic that we're going to share today. So if you're still popping in while we're meditating, just join in, drop in. I'm going to talk you through a heart coherence meditation today. So this is where we are going to sync up the frequency waves from our heart and the brain waves from our brain, and we're going to bring ourselves into heart coherence. So this is really simple. There's 3 steps: focus and breath and feeling. And to do this, you just need to get yourselves comfortable in your seat. If you are moving or driving or anything else that doesn't allow you to just be still right now, please don't try and meditate while you drive. But please, if you are able to sit and close your eyes, I invite you to get yourselves comfortable and close your eyes and start to bring your attention to your breath. Just feeling your sit bones on the surface underneath you, feeling your body fully present in this moment, giving yourself the gift of full attention for the benefit of this next hour. Starting to slow your breath and bringing your awareness inward, moving your awareness away from all of the things that have happened already today in your external world and just bringing it in, giving yourself the gift of this time. And as you start to bring your breath slower and deeper, I invite you to move your focus to your heart center in the center of your chest. And you can do this by lightly bringing a palm to the center of your chest or a couple of fingers, just to help you bring light touch awareness to your heart center. Continuing to breathe more slowly than usual. And start to breathe as if you're breathing from your heart. So you're breathing in deeply, really expanding your chest. And starting to exhale longer than the inhale. So you're breathing in deeply and you're exhaling very slowly. And this is triggering your parasympathetic nervous system, or the relaxation response, as you make your exhale longer than the inhale. And I'm just going to count one time for you to help you get into that rhythm. So getting ready to inhale, it's to a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Continue with a rhythm like that that feels comfortable for you. Shorter inhale, longer exhale, as if you're breathing from your heart. Continuing at that pace, allowing your body to settle into this rhythm. And now I invite you to bring into your heart space a feeling of gratitude. regardless of anything else that's going on in your life. Just really tapping into what you're grateful for in this moment. Choosing to feel gratitude above all other emotions in this moment. And tapping into your gratitude for the opportunity to gather here with this incredible group of people to learn something new and to expand your consciousness. Gratitude for all of the people that created this space for us to learn together, for this, all the possibilities that this will open. And just gratitude for all the things that are beautiful in your life, for your body that allows you to be sitting in a chair and breathing right now, being here, for all of the people who support you, for the gift of this life experience. Just taking this opportunity also to recognize that many people in the world do not have this opportunity right now. And so, on behalf of our human collective, may we declare that whatever learning and growth we do today be for the benefit of all. And feeling gratitude for this incredible opportunity to be of service. Continuing to breathe in deeply and exhaling longer than the inhale. Continuing to feel that gratitude in your heart, bringing your heart and brain into coherence, becoming fully present and ready to receive. And now I invite you, when you're ready, to bring your awareness back to the rest of your body. Slowly open your eyes. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being present with us. Thank you for the opportunity. So, Sarah, my dear, if you could share my slides, I'm going to get started. And we are talking about a pretty innovative topic today, psychedelic medicine. As you see from the title here, it says psychedelic medicine for peak performance. Usually this is what I talk about, psychedelic medicine for peak performance. And I'll talk about even what peak performance is. But today we're really going to also focus on how important coaching is in this process. We thought we would start with a little poll just so we have an idea of like, what kind of audience are we working with here? How experienced are all of you with this topic and with this medicine? So I think there's going to be a poll for you here. If you're not familiar with Zoom polls, you just select it. It's totally anonymous, so don't worry. No one's going to know how you're answering these questions, but we would love to know, how many times have you experienced psychedelics, if this is something that you have experienced yourself in your life. And if you did, was this like a recreational experience back in college? Was it a therapeutic experience? And oh wow, I did not see this one about the AI, but hey, we might as well answer that question too.
Left over from a past webinars. That is a mistake, but of course, sorry about that.
I mean, it's a super interesting question, so why not? Okay. Oh, Ness, did you use coaching with your psychedelic experience? If you had psychedelic experiences, did you include coaching? And is AI going to come for my job? I like that question. So let's get everybody to submit. And once we start seeing those results, we will share. And I think that'll just be super interesting for informing this conversation. Looks like these results are coming in. Super, super interesting.
And I shared them with everybody. Kai, if you want to go ahead and
Okay, awesome. So I am curious. it's interesting to see like what percentage of you have had a psychedelic experience might be the same percentage of people who know who this bearded man in this photo with me is. But this is Paul Stamets from, if you ever saw the movie Fantastic Fungi, famous mycologist. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Sarah. This is just sort of like, you know, who I am in the psychedelic world. I've won some awards. I'm involved with a venture capital fund that funds psychedelic companies. I co-founded a psychedelic company, and now I work one-on-one with clients to help them have these experiences. So in general, when you think of psychedelics, it's, yeah, go ahead. It's interesting what imagery comes to mind, because there's sort of the hippie trippy, drop out, tune in, drop out. And then the next slide, Sarah, like there's also these high powered CEOs speaking very openly about how important psychedelics have been to the innovations that they've come up with in their businesses. So, it's always interesting to me, as you can go to the next slide, as psychedelics are more and more in the news. What are you thinking? Because I think perceptions are really changing. This special on Netflix, not sure if many of you saw it, really did, and Michael Pollan's book by the same name, How to Change Your Mind, really did start to open up the conversation in more of a mainstream way over the past couple of years. And I thought we might want to just actually define what psychedelics are by, looking at how the National Institutes of Health considers psychedelics to be powerful psychoactive substances that alter perception and mood and affect numerous cognitive processes, but they're generally considered psychologically safe and do not lead to dependence or addiction. And I think that's a really important distinction, because people often ask me about, well, isn't this a drug? Isn't it addictive? And let's move on to what is peak performance. And as I said, I am often speaking to audiences about peak performance, but peak performance doesn't just mean climbing Mount Everest. Peak performance is reaching a level of exceptional functioning where you're at the maximum of your ability. You're fully focused and you're feeling confident, engaged, and enjoying your life. On to the next slide, Sarah. But that can mean a lot of things, for different people. So as I mentioned, psychedelics have been quite in the mainstream news, from Aaron Rodgers, the football player, Tim Ferriss, Huberman, like the biggest podcasts all speaking about it. Elon Musk saying that his psychedelic use is good for his shareholders. So people, as this is happening, are certainly thinking about, well, is this an experience that could help me in my life or people that I know? And I know we have many coaches online with us today. So this might be something that your clients have been asking you about to help them achieve this new levels of peak performance. All right, next slide. So here's what I am going to talk about, just so you are in the right place. If you're curious about psychedelics, but you don't know if they're right for you or somebody that you love, if there is another level of flow and mastery and impact that you haven't quite reached yet, and you feel like this might help you break through, if you know someone that is struggling with depression, anxiety, addiction, insomnia, overwhelm, there are many mental health conditions that psychedelics can be very helpful with, that do not lead to daily dependent prescription medicine use. Or you just want to know, how do I actually access this in a way that is safe and to get the results that I want? Because there's a lot of different options out there and they aren't all going to give you that result. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I have this formula that I've developed, the Peak formula. And I wanted to find a way to make the steps of what I've discovered over the past 7 years, working with these medicines extensively, working with many, many clients to help our sort of architect an ideal psychedelic experience and then outcomes. How do we remember the 4 steps that are really key here? So that's what I'm going to be going through today with this Peak formula for achieving sort of like peak performance in all areas of your life, from business to health to relationships to connecting with your purpose and ultimately joy, which is what I'm all about. So next slide. So yes, speaking of me being all about joy, I wrote, I just want to give you guys like a little bit of background about who I am, besides one of Sarah's best friends for the past 24 years. Sarah and I actually met when we both, she co-founded an organization called Young Women Social Entrepreneurs. We were both in our early 20s doing social entrepreneur work. I have been a serial entrepreneur since I was 10, and mostly just really passionate about the fields of health and wellness. I wrote this book, The Joy Plan, about the neuroscience of joy. In 2017, it came out, and it was actually from definitely not a place of joy. It was about a epigenetics software company that I started over 10 years ago. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry, nobody else knew what it was 10 years ago either. I was way too early. The business, ran out of runway, didn't go the way it was meant to. I fell into depression. And then I thought, look, I know all of these hacks and tools to get myself out of this. I'm going to make joy my number one priority for 30 days. I wrote down everything that I did. It ended up turning my life around in a really profound way, becoming this book that was on the Today Show. And I started teaching the principles from the Joy Plan in companies like Zoom. That's the CEO of Zoom there, Eric Yuan, in schools with children. And I was a journalist who, at the time also with a few columns and a few publications writing about joy and health and wellness. So you can go to the next slide. So as a journalist, I was offered things for free all the time. Write about this product, come do this experience and write about it. And most of the time, I just ignored all of that. But one day, I got this invitation for a free week at a retreat center in Costa Rica that just sounded too good to be true. It was like yoga and life coaching and cleansing and juicing and on the beach and meditation and massages and something called plant medicine. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. I like plants. I'm vegan. I use ginger and garlic when my kids are sick, like plant medicine. That sounds great, right? So, I kind of vaguely knew then it was ayahuasca. It was some kind of like tea that we were going to drink that might make me vomit. But beyond that, I really knew very little about what I was about to experience. And so I found myself in this room at this retreat center in Costa Rica with 70 people, all wearing white, lying on mattresses on the floor with buckets next to their mattresses, just thinking like, did I join a cult? Like, what is going on here? Definitely not what I had in mind for my free week at a resort in Costa Rica. However, I did drink I won't call it Kool-Aid because it's the opposite of Kool-Aid. I did drink the ayahuasca, and I ended up having just such a next level experience, like beyond what I knew was possible. And I have been a meditator since I was a child. I've done a lot of personal growth work. I actually trained as a facilitator in a personal growth modality called body electronics when I was 11. I had started leading retreats as a teenager with my dad. I have been expanding my personal growth my entire life practically. So I didn't really think there was much more to experience. And then I realized I knew, about this much. So it was very, very profound for me, to say the least. Let's go to the next slide. After my psychedelic experience.
I'm in here too to say that Kaia had such a powerful experience that she then asked me to go down to join her. And Lynn Twist, who was actually our very first presenter in our webinar series, had been my first exposure to ayahuasca back in 2005. She's leading trips down to Ecuador to work with the indigenous shaman who have been using this medicine for centuries. And, amazing that they found this vine and this root and combined them together to create this awakening experience. So wanted to add that piece. And
Thank you,
my
Sarah.
gratitude to you, Kaia, for while my first psychedelic ayahuasca experiences were in the jungle, That was a wonderful time with you in Costa Rica.
Thank you, Sarah. So I want to talk about a few things that happened just to sort of give an example of how this medicine can really create profound changes in people's lives. That photo at the top left is quite embarrassing for me to share, but I share it just in hopes that it will inspire others. And it might be even be a little bit hard to see, but if you look closely, you can see that's my torso, and it's completely covered in psoriasis, which is a chronic autoimmune skin condition that I've had my entire life. And at various times in my life, it's covered about 90% of my body, which was happening before I had my plant medicine experiences. And then, there on the right, you can see my skin is clear. So that is one of the things that happened after, wasn't my first plant medicine experience, but one of my future plant medicine experiences. I also suffered from terrible insomnia. That basket is all the things that I had to take every night to just be able to fall asleep. Definitely not a problem anymore. And it really, I just found that it like upgraded my life in all these ways. So it made me a better mom. I had some investments that did quite well because I actually got some insights about some investments to make. I realized that my marriage was no longer a healthy place for me to be, and got the bravery to leave that. And I just became obsessed with figuring out, like, what just happened to my brain? Why are all of these things changing? Why am I operating with so much clarity and just like a totally newfound purpose? So I obsessively, as a researcher, as I do, interviewed shaman, interviewed quantum physicists. I got involved with a biotech company. This is in a lab in Maryland that's actually making psychedelics in a lab. I just went at it from every angle to learn as much as I could. And I also, you can go to the next slide, wanted to try all of the different psychedelics for myself so that I could understand how they were the same, how they were different. So I learned about ketamine, which is not a classic psychedelic, but all of these compounds have very similar effects on the brain because ketamine is federally legal. I was a co-founder of a ketamine startup, KetaMD, that was acquired a couple of years ago. I went to Mexico and journeyed with ibogaine, which was very profound. And I sat with, especially when we were starting the ketamine company, hundreds of people learning about dosing and their experiences. And I also just interviewed hundreds, maybe even over 1,000 people about their experiences so that I could really learn as much as I could about this. And what I found out was that, the main reasons people were coming to these medicines are for their mental health, their physical health, healing past trauma, they're seeking a spiritual connection, or they have a desire for more purpose and direction. And I think this might be on my next slide, Sarah, so let's check. Yes, so these are sort of the main reasons why I found people are going for a psychedelic experience. And I consider all of those to be peak performance. Like I said, peak performance isn't just you're climbing Mount Everest. It might be I overcame my trauma and now I don't have that software script running in the background, slowing everything down in my brain. It could be I cleared up my psoriasis, so now I'm in a better state of physical health. So I consider all of these areas to be helping us achieve, our full potential. However, what I found is that without the right integration support, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about, as it pertains to coaching, people could be coming to these experiences, having perhaps a profound experience, but then not actually seeing any lasting changes in their lives. And I really wanted to create a way that we could make those changes last. You can go to the next slide. This is about, so I work with a lot of CEOs, and I thought I would just leave this slide in here because I think it's really interesting. And I know that A-Plan works with a lot of executives too. So everybody experiences, of course, stress, fatigue, anxiety, but CEOs and entrepreneurs tend to experience these things at double like the normal population. And I really find that it's because they have this tremendous pressure on themselves to, they're in charge of a lot of people and a lot of things. And there's this like leadership loneliness that can happen at that level. 70% of C-suite executives are seriously considering quitting for their well-being. I thought that was really interesting. So I end up working with a lot of executives to help them restructure how they are experiencing this place of leadership that they're in. So I wanted to keep that one in. You can go to the next slide. So a lot of the common mistakes that people make when they are going in for these experiences are they don't understand how important the intention is. Intention, there's a saying in quantum physics that energy follows intent. We live in an energetic field, and that field is responding to our thoughts and our words and our actions, and our intention is creating our reality all of the time. But this is very heightened when psychedelics are involved. So it's very important to be clear about the intention. The aftercare plan is like way more than 50% of the equation as well, because I'm going to talk about some of the changes that happen in the brain after you've had a psychedelic experience, and how you take advantage of those changes is everything when it comes to lasting results. You may know some people that keep going back for experience after experience after experience, but they're not getting that breakthrough, or they're not getting that lasting result that they want. So I have some suggestions for that. And you may also have heard about bad experiences, which can definitely happen if the setting isn't right, if the facilitator isn't coming from the right place. And not every psychedelic medicine is actually appropriate, biologically for each person's body. These are chemical compounds, and we're each chemically different. So I'm going to talk about that as well, some of the different options and how to know which one's right, for you or someone that you're working with. So this is all part of my peak formula. So we can go ahead to the next slide. So let's get into the formula. So the first P is for prepare. And this is where that intention really comes in. And often, so when I'm working with clients and I'm helping them prepare for a journey, I'm working with them ahead of time on that intention. And so often you all that are on the call that are coaches, if you are working with a client who is seeking this kind of treatment, you would be working with them prior to the journey. So this is the preparation phase where you're getting really clear about what you are aiming for. What is your plan? What is your commitment to in this journey? And this is not just like a party experience. So really my recommendation is, if you're going to take the time and spend the money to have a psychedelic experience, take it very seriously and create the time and the space to have your intention, to get yourself into the right mindset leading up to it. And you can go to the next slide. And also, understand what your options are, because there's so many different options. Maybe you've heard about microdosing. So this is when you take like an imperceptible small amount of a psychedelic, and there's many different psychedelics that people microdose, from psilocybin to LSD. I even have heard about people microdosing ketamine, and it's all for different reasons. So really understanding what those options are, what the protocols are. Some people are doing 5 days on, 2 days off, or 2 days on, 5 days off. There's a lot of, and it depends again on, what you're treating. This is like, these are medical protocols, even though modern medicine hasn't caught up with it yet. And then there's these peak performances, which is more like what Sarah and I were speaking about with ayahuasca, where you take in a larger amount of the compound and you have quite a profound, large experience that can last many hours, and you're integrating it for many days. This can happen with a number of different medicines, such as ayahuasca, a large amount of psilocybin, ibogaine, even a large ketamine journey can be a peak experience. And these experiences vary widely, and the integration is definitely key. And being completely safe within that space where you're having that experience, and the people who are interacting with you during that time, is totally critical to what that experience is going to be about. Okay, next slide. So there's also individual and group experiences. So a lot of times people do these psychedelics in groups. And like here's some pictures of that one on the right is Harvard Medical School doctors and also some doctors from Yale Medical School that came together at a retreat center outside of Boston. And I led them in a weekend where we were doing ketamine treatment, but also, learning about how they might want to integrate these treatments into their protocols with their patients. And yeah, it's something that is, especially with ketamine, because it's legal in this country, although that top photo is an ayahuasca group in Costa Rica. But especially with ketamine, it is something that people are doing more and more in groups and finding that there is a group effect. But there's also these individual experiences, and it just depends on what your intent is, which one might be better for you at different times. Next slide. So then, these are some of the compounds. So people, maybe haven't even heard of all of these. And I think we were going to put up a poll and see if any of you have actually experienced these medications and these compounds. And they all have a totally different chemical structure. They all have a totally different history and cultural aspects related to them. They interact very differently. I think we have there should be a different question, Teo, here. We were going to ask about and it's okay. If we don't have that poll here, it's okay. We were going to ask which of the psychedelic medicines you've had experience with and list those compounds, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I right, Tyler? The poll doesn't seem to be working, but we'll see if we can.
Okay, but I lost my slides, Sarah.
Great.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just quickly, I'll let you know what these are in case you don't know. Psilocybin is a type of psychoactive mushrooms. There's actually hundreds of different species of psychoactive mushrooms. Psilocin is the psychoactive compound in there. When you get into this, you will learn that different mushrooms are more appropriate for different types of intentions. There's like a whole study into the mycology, just the mushrooms. So that's like a whole other category. There are certain psychedelics that were, originally synthesized from plant material, like LSD came from some mold on a rye seed, MDMA. These compounds were developed in a lab. Doesn't mean they're any less powerful, but just different. There's, some come from plants, some come from a lab. MDMA, you've maybe heard, there has been a lot in the news about, because the FDA is going to be making a ruling in August about whether to make FDA federally legal or not. Ayahuasca, as we spoke about, long thousands of years tradition from the jungle. It's actually a mixture of two different plants boiled together. Peyote or San Pedro, these are sacred cacti. Bufo, also known as 5-MeO-DMT, comes from the secretions on the back of a toad in Mexico that is psychoactive. Iboga or ibogaine, my personal favorite, is from a root of a plant that grows in southern Africa. Very, very powerful for addiction. Very, very powerful, used by the Bwiti people as a rite of passage for many thousands of years once people reach a certain age. And then these psychedelics can be used in combinations as well. So if you're considering this, there are many different options. So it's good to understand all the different options. And, there's actually tests that will be coming on the market eventually. You could take a psychedelic compatibility test with, I'm not sure if it's saliva or blood. I'm guessing it's probably blood. And it will actually tell you what psychedelics are best for your body. So we are getting to that level of precision with this eventually.
I have a question for you, and also want to encourage folks, feel free to put questions in the chat. We will take them at the end, and also pop in, maybe pop into some breakout groups or some dialogue depending on timing. But Kaia, I'm curious that ketamine, which you've mentioned numerous times,
it's coming next.
Not on this list. Okay, there we go.
So here's ketamine. I put ketamine on a different list because ketamine really is not a classic psychedelic. Ketamine is a dissociative. They discovered its sort of psychedelic properties by accident. In the 1970s, they were giving ketamine to soldiers on the battlefield during Vietnam who had to have like emergency amputations or surgeries on the battlefield. And those patients who had ketamine were coming out with way better outcomes, way less depression and suicidality than patients who didn't have ketamine. And so they discovered, kind of by accident, that ketamine has this really profound antidepressant effect. It's very safe and very fast acting. It's different as well because ketamine really reacts with almost no other medications. Whereas, say you wanted to have an ayahuasca experience, but you are on SSRIs, which a lot of people are, it's not safe to be using ayahuasca with SSRIs. Whereas with ketamine, you can. So many things about ketamine that are different than the rest of the psychedelics, but primarily that it's very accessible. There are ketamine clinics all over the country now, and there are at-home telehealth ketamine services like KetaMD that I co-founded, and many psychologists and therapists now are working with ketamine with their patients and clients. So this is, it's very profound. I mean, it really works in 90% of patients to reduce anxiety after 2 treatments. Sometimes it takes more than 1 treatment. And suicidal ideation and depression reduced in 70% of cases, which is, double antidepressants, the effectiveness of antidepressants. So I'm a huge fan of ketamine. I didn't think I would be, being somebody who tries to have everything be like plant-based and very natural. But I have seen ketamine just change the lives of thousands of people. I mean, literally watched people unable to get out of bed and take a shower, like very, very depressed, move on and have fabulous careers and get off all of their medications and fall in love and get jobs and, just really turn their lives around over and over and over again. So those of you who are coaches and you're thinking about this treatment for your clients, ketamine might be the easiest one to access. So I wanted to put that on its own slide. Okay, so moving on from that, if you do not prepare properly, then you can have bad experiences and side effects. And without an intention, you might just have an interesting experience, but it could be confusing and you might not really have the long-term effects. So it's very important to prepare properly, know which medicine is best, and create the intention in the right set and setting. Okay, going on. We are moving on to the E of the peak formula, which is explore. So once you are in the psychedelic experience, this is when you are a psychonaut. So, astronauts explore outer space, psychonauts explore inner space, and learning how to actually navigate that experience, it is a skill. And it's important for maximizing the benefits. And I think that is one area where we don't really talk about it enough, like what actually happens while you're in there. So you can go to the next slide and I can tell you about some of the typical experiences that people have. And this really varies widely depending on the compound, each person's individual neurochemistry, the mindset you have going into it, your intention, your setting. I mean, there's so many factors. But some typical experiences could be visuals, could be aha moments where you just have realizations that you didn't have access to before, accessing past memories, and that could be any kind of memory. Could be a fabulous memory, could be a trauma. Meeting ancestors is something very common. Having conversations that feel like you're speaking with God or some aspect of your higher self, profound conversations. All kinds of bodily sensations that range from the purging that you've probably heard about to actual miraculous physical healing, which I have experienced and witnessed. And hearing, some people are very auditory, so they're hearing messages. Okay, going on. So understanding that those are some of the experiences that you can have and knowing how to navigate while you're in there, as in some advice I give my clients, for example, like surrender to the experience. You set your intention, but then let go and allow it to come. If something comes that's scary, just know that you're safe, but don't run away from it and allow it. It's there to teach you. Things like, there's a lot of like instructions that you can have going into it, but without that sort of guidebook for how to navigate, it could be very confusing. You might not remember what happened. You might miss the insights that came to you and just not really see clearly what the benefit of it all was. I work with my clients in a very particular way. I have them write down questions on each page of a notebook going into the journey, and then doing some journaling as they're coming out of it, while they might have some extra clarity and maybe some answers to those questions will come from their own subconscious as they're integrating, and other things like that. So let's move on. That's the E for explore. Now the big one is A for apply. And as I've said before, this is not like 25%, this is 50% or more of the importance of really getting the benefit of psychedelics, which is the integration process. So this is when you take the insights that you've gained and you actually apply them to your life. And it's so cool that psychedelics have these effects on our brain, which I'm going to talk about, because it makes it so much easier to apply these new changes than usually is. It's a really profound biohack, actually. Changing habits isn't always so easy, but after a psychedelic experience, you have this window of time where when you implement new daily practices, which it could be thoughts or words or actions, you are forming new neural pathways that make that a lot easier. Let's go to the next slide and I'll talk about these brain changes. So what's really cool is I listed all those psychedelics, right? And they're all so different, from cactuses to toads to, vines, but they all have certain effects on the brain that are exactly the same, specifically reducing the processing of negative stimuli, which basically means you just become more positive. They've actually studied eye movements of people, after psychedelics, and they don't even notice negative input as much. So you tend to just have this increased positivity and a decreased negativity bias. It also decreases the activity in the default mode network. I'm going to, on the next slide, go into what these things are a little bit. Reduces the amygdala activity and stimulates neurogenesis, which is new neuron growth in the brain. This is similar to brain states observed in deep meditation. So in a way, it's like inducing, spending many years in a monastery meditating. And it's like defragging a computer. You're getting rid of all the noise and all the junk that's slowing you down for this window of time. It also increases communication between pathways in the brain that don't usually communicate. So it's really fascinating what happens to the brain. And in a way, what you experienced in the psychedelic experience doesn't even really matter. I mean, if you get insights, if you get visuals, if you get cool conversations with God, awesome. But all of this happens regardless. So that's, I think, also important for people to know. Okay, so let's just dive a little bit more into what these mean. So your amygdala, if you don't know what it is, if you put your thumbs inside your palms, make a fist and put your two fists together, this is roughly the size of your brain. And you have one of these in each hemisphere, and that's your amygdala. It's a little clump of cells. It does a bunch of things regarding emotions and emotion processing, but one of the main things that it does is sense danger. And it tells you when you should fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, make everything better. So it's scanning for danger all the time. And some of us have more highly reactive amygdalas than others. It's very high amygdala reactivity in depression and other mental health conditions. And we all need to be safe, right? Like, of course, it's important to have an accurate danger sensor, but a lot of times our amygdala is telling us when we're not safe when we actually are. And one of the drawbacks of this is that when the amygdala is activated, it blocks the prefrontal cortex, which is this area right behind our forehead, where we do just our higher reasoning and logic and, make good decisions. So our decision-making capabilities are greatly reduced when the amygdala is too active. And the negativity bias, as you can see from that cute little cartoon there, is just another thing that our brains are wired with to keep us safe. We will focus 3 times more attention on anything negative than anything positive because it could be dangerous. So if you have a fabulous day and somebody gives you a great compliment and you spend some time in the sunshine and you had a great workout and you had a lovely conversation with someone, and then you step in dog poop on your way home, like what's the one thing that you're going to focus on? Like we tend to focus on the negative thing. That's just how we're wired. So moving on, also, I want to talk about the default mode network because this is so important and just really running the show more than I think we realize. 90% of our thoughts are repetitive. And for many of us, that's rumination over the problems that we feel like we need to solve. The default mode network is where our brain goes in any micro moments that it's not busy doing something critical, and it defaults to thinking about ourselves. Some people have a creative default mode network and they're thinking about some creative project, but many of us are ruminating over problems, and we can get very stuck in these automatic negative thought loops, and it can be really hard to change them. So all of these things are reduced after a psychedelic experience: the amygdala, the negativity bias, and the default mode network activity. And this is a really profound opportunity to change the script in the default mode network. So this is where the A in apply for the peak formula comes into play. So moving on. Also, speaking about rewriting the script, if you aren't familiar with neuroplasticity, I highly recommend my favorite book, Your Fantastic Elastic Brain. I taught in elementary schools for 5 years, and I also read this book to CEOs because I just love this book so much, explaining how our brains have this powerful neuroplasticity where we are actually changing and reshaping our brain all the time, especially during childhood. But it becomes more difficult to do as we're older. Our habits become more solidified. So after a psychedelic experience, when we have a burst of new neuron and new dendrite growth, it's a lot easier to form these neural pathways with new habits than it usually is. And I give the example of folding a piece of paper. So if you fold a piece of paper for the first time, you have to really take the time to make the grooves in it and then go again and really line it up and press down. So that's forming a neural pathway. But then once it's already folded, it just goes back automatically. And so much of what's happening in our brain are just these automatic neural pathways. But when you want to create new ones, it's like freshly driven snow on a ski slope. All of a sudden, you have the opportunity to lay down new tracks. That's where coaching can really, really help. And if you don't do this, you can miss the window of opportunity. You have a shorter window of time. It's actually different with each psychedelic. It differs per person. We can say up to 90 days is this kind of critical window of change. And all of your thoughts, words, and actions become strengthened during this time. So you can actually make things worse. If you have a psychedelic experience and then you start focusing on a bunch of negative stuff or doing some habits that are not beneficial for you, you'll strengthen those. So it is important to understand this and really apply it to get the benefits. And then that probably brings us, let's see, to the K, I think, which is keep going. And so this is where coaching comes in. And we have many coaches on the line here, so I'm hopeful that we'll get to a place where we can have some discussion about how you all can support your clients, or maybe this is an experience that you want to have for yourselves, to really have this new habit, new neural pathway formation process being the goal of the coaching after a psychedelic experience to maximize the brain effects. Moving on to the next slide. If you don't keep up with those new practices, then you could just revert back to your old habits. There's all kinds of studies about how long it takes to form a new habit. It depends on what it is. Could be an average of 66 days. I ask people to commit to coaching for at least 90 days following a psychedelic experience. Okay, next slide. Now, I put this up here just because you might be wondering, how do I do this if I want to do it? Like, there's a lot of things to decide. So there are people that work as a psychedelic consultant. This is a magazine, New York Magazine article quoting our fabulous Sarah, CEO of A Plan, talking about how she worked with me as a psychedelic consultant, just helping with all the things like what is the right compound for you? What is your set and setting? How are you going to access this legally? What's your integration and coaching plan? Is this something that you need for your family members? Are your family members supportive of your journey? There's just so many things to consider. You can go to the next slide. I have to keep most of my clients confidential, but this is a client who I worked with that has been very outspoken about his psychedelic experience. Lamar Odom, former basketball player, formerly married to Khloe Kardashian. He had a very public overdose. Maybe you all remember in 2015, he actually had 12 strokes and 6 heart attacks and was told he may never walk or talk again. And yet after that, he was still unable to stop using cocaine until he had his ibogaine experience. And ever since then, he has not used drugs again. And then he continues with his ketamine treatments for anxiety. And again, I can speak about it because he's been very, open about speaking about his journey and about working with me. So it's been an honor to help someone and see how profound it can be for addiction. Now, this is my favorite aspect of psychedelics, which I love this. This is an actual term used in the psychedelic research, psychedelic-induced optimism. So psychedelics actually, can induce this optimism in the brain. And this is the ultimate peak performance biohack because optimists are happier and more creative, faster at solving problems, have increased mental alertness, less cortisol, which is the stress hormone, more serotonin, which helps us feel better and actually live longer. So anything that induces optimism, I'm all for. And let's go to the next slide. I think
I think this is mostly your 2 wrap-up slides here. So I'll keep
yeah,
that on display.
I'm pretty much
We've
done.
got a question from our audience that I want to put to you, and then Michael's got his hand raised. First, Grace asked a question, and Grace, if you want, you could just pop off mute and ask your question, or I can do it for you.
Thanks for listening to me, everyone.
Yes, I'm particularly interested in neurodiversity, including even ADD, and so how does psychedelics impact those, and what's the kind of coaching follow through needed for those? Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing, amazing question, and such an interesting area for further research. I have seen some whole organizations that are really focused on psychedelics and autism. So I definitely recommend looking that up. There's a book, actually, Psychedelics and Autism, and there's promising research for help with psychedelics and neurodivergent qualities. You may have heard about microdosing LSD is a lot of people say an amazing replacement for Adderall or for medications that people use for ADD. I've heard people express that they've experienced that. I think this is an area that really requires more research. One of the things about psychedelics is that they are still Schedule 1 for the FDA and the DEA. So we have been unable to really research them since the 1970s. And there is just so much research that's needed because these compounds are profound and there's just so much promise here. So that is one area that I think there's a lot of promise. I don't, personally have a ton of experience with it besides those 2. Definitely, there's a whole body of research on autism and microdosing LSD for ADD, which I've heard about.
If I can just drop a name, Dr. Daniel Amen has done a lot of brain research on ADD, and he has a very repeatable and reliable brain scan technique. So it would be lovely to see the intersection of his technique with yours. That could help with the research. Yeah.
Thank you. How do you spell his last name?
As in Amen.
Oh,
Hallelujah.
perfect.
Amen.
Thank you.
Daniel
Thank
Amen.
you.
He's very famous. Yeah. He's written
Wonderful.
a lot of research.
Thank you so much.
Michael, I see you put your hand down, but do you still have a question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I know we're kind of running out of time, Kai. I really love the presentation. I so admire what you've done here and your work generally. You know, I've been sober for 23 years and I've been super curious about this. I have in my recreational drug use, I had some really powerful and deep spiritual experiences with psychedelics. I've been a little scared of exploring this for myself, given my history of sobriety. And yeah, and I just would love to hear a minute of your thoughts on that, because it's such a, I sort of, I hear all the great things, and I'm also a
Yeah.
little scared by it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking that and for, sharing your fears and your personal experience. I get this question a lot because a lot of people are in that same situation and they think, well, why would you, especially even people that are dealing with addiction, like, why would you take drugs to get off drugs? And that's why I did like to start with that definition of psychedelics from the NIH in the beginning that says these are non-addictive compounds. And I know that addiction doesn't always come from the physical addiction. It can come from, personality or something. But I also want to say that most of these psychedelic experiences are not something that you want to have that often. Like I can't imagine ayahuasca or ibogaine being like addictive. Like it's not really that pleasant, to be frank. So I consider these to be a medicine, not a drug. A medicine goes in and it helps you discover the root cause of what you're working on and dig it up to the surface. And that is not always a pleasant experience. And it's not necessarily an experience that you want to go back to over and over again. But a drug suppresses symptoms. And so psychedelics don't do that. And so to me, they're very, very different. And I have, like I said, helped a lot of people make that, especially with ketamine, because ketamine, people get used to like their ketamine, people snort up their nose in a club. And this is medical ketamine is very different than that. But they have to break through that sort of mental barrier of like, I don't want to do a drug, I'm sober. But when they do, they get so much benefit from it. And there's just no desire in an addictive way to do that. It's just so different. And it also, like, because of the brain changes, especially ibogaine, if addiction is an issue for anyone that you know or love, ibogaine works on the addiction receptors in the brain. It brings the brain back to a pre-addicted state. And so there's just no option. Like I told the story of Lamar Odom. There's just no option to go back really because it's repulsive. So yeah, I don't know if that helps, but I have definitely seen a lot of people have that concern and go through with it anyway and be very happy that they did.
It does. Thank you so much.
I know Kaia generously offered to stay on. So Jenny, we will take your question in just a moment, but I want to, for those of you who have another appointment at the top of the hour, want to officially end our time together. And thank you so much, Kaia, for bringing your expertise. Kaia is not only a dear friend, also an A-Plan coaching client, and has helped guide me as we set up our integration coaching services. So deep, deep gratitude, Kaia. And Jenny, let's move to your question now. But for those who need to leave, feel free to do so.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Hi, Jenny.
Okay, to unmute. Hi, thanks so much for this. This was fantastic. I guess because I'm a social worker, I'm curious, and I've had recent plant medicine experiences. So I've been off my SSRIs, I'm off my Adderall, I'm off of, and it's been amazing, and I'm microdosing psilocybin. But for my low-income clients that I work with as a social worker, I know this stuff works. And I was just curious, given the legality, just given so many complications, if you had any thoughts of how one can begin to share this in a legal way. I just don't even know where to begin, and I'm scared of even mentioning it to clients because yeah.
I appreciate you bringing that up because it's really sad that at this moment, access is, access in a super safe way and in the right way, so that people have the proper integration support is expensive. However, I can tell you there are kits you can buy online to grow psilocybin mushrooms that cost very little, and you can grow a lot of psilocybin mushrooms for very little, as a science experiment, not suggesting anything illegal. I mean, and also not suggesting that somebody just consumes psilocybin mushrooms, but it is a compound that is not necessarily expensive to come by, and can be used in a ceremonial way with the right support. Different than, say, ketamine, which it does require getting it through a medical doctor, and at this time is very rarely covered by insurance. There are cases where ketamine, if you get it through a psychiatrist, the insurance covers the psychiatry part, and the ketamine they just kind of throw in. So, you can find individual practices that are using it that way.
And I actually know of a place in New York City that's they do scholarships, and they're really great. And I know that for me was the way that I weaned off of my SSRIs, is using ketamine. And because it's legal, there's more access there.
Amazing.
But I guess it's just waiting for the
like
FDA to approve these things.
Ibogaine, some of the other plant medicines that you really usually need to travel out of the country to access. Again, it's about like finding scholarships. There's certainly organizations that are providing those treatments for veterans. But we need more access. We need the laws to change.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I just thought I would ask. Thank you. This has been great, though.
Yeah. Thank you.
Salinas, I saw your hand pop up and pop down. I would give you our last question, as I am now late for my next meeting, but want to not end this wonderful time together. So
I want to say thank you so much for bringing this to the community. It's an area I'm passionate about, but I also continue to think, as someone who works in the space of regeneration, like, how does this have an impact on the planet? I'm in those larger conversations, and also still continue to think, like, Jenny, I appreciate your question around legalization and low-income people, because there is a stigma that happens, especially if you're a person of color and you're entering into this world. And a lot of this is garnered from folks of color. So I think a lot about, like, where are we sourcing it from, how we with it and honoring that, and then, like, how do we negotiate that as people are going into profit sharing and legalization.
Yes. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I want to recommend the Chacruna Institute as a wonderful resource if you're not familiar with them. It's spelled CHACRUNA. And they are doing wonderful work for access and inclusion, and safe practices of harvesting medicines that are coming from the jungle, and preserving, like, the cultures and the people that this medicine comes from. And we need more and more of that, for sure. I'm all for as many people getting the benefits of this medicine as possible. And some of it's made in a lab and some of it comes from the earth. But we have to take care of our global planet in every way. So yeah, this is a very important part of the conversation that needs to be happening. So thank you for bringing that up.
wonderful. Again, thank you all for joining us, whether you're listening to the recording or joined us live. It's a meaningful and important conversation. And Kaia, we're deeply grateful for the gift of your time and expertise today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Cree Scott will be talking about how to create psychological safety, both in our professional environments, but also in our personal ones. So
thank you so much for having me. And if anyone wants to book a consultation with me, I do free consults at rebootcamp.me. You can book a consultation with me there if you have more questions that we didn't get to cover today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Kaia.
Thanks, Kaia.